Hi everyone, it's William. I'm back to wearing a sweater, as you can see. And this is the 1906 diary entry. And our poor little guy is still feeling very down in the dumps. We are in Ilyinskoye, having arrived there on a Saturday, and now it's Monday, the 29th of May, and I reluctantly decided to do this diary entry in two parts. It starts out with a long paragraph and there's a shorter paragraph, which we'll do tomorrow. Meanwhile, you may be able to hear the joyful cries of children playing beyond my backyard fence, and I guess it's nice that there are some happy children out there, because Dimitri certainly is not feeling happy at this time. All right, we will dive right in. 29th May, Monday. I can't get rid of this painful feeling. Sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. God knows when it will pass. It's absolutely not the guards on duty around the palace here and at Usuva who are giving me this strange feeling, as Tyotya suggested. Mashkovsky, an officer of the Kiev regiment, is in charge of security. He's very nice and doesn't bother anyone. Today, Mikhail Petrovich had heart pain. The doctor is afraid it's angina, and the poor old man felt awful, so he didn't make an appearance today. We had coffee in the morning at 7:30. I was late, which made Tyotya very angry. And then we went riding, Maria on Normandy's and myself on a Swede. Afterwards, we went to the sweet house where Zakharchenko and Burba were weaving, and we sat around there for a long time. Then Maria and I went bike riding and watched how wool is dyed. At 10:30, Tyotya went into town, and we had lunch at 1 o'clock. Afterwards, I played soldiers with Borya, and at 5 o'clock, Tyotya came and we had tea, after which I went riding with GM, who hadn't been on a horse for a very long time and rode very poorly on this occasion. I felt sorry for him. He didn't feel at all at home in the saddle. Okay, I should have said to begin with that Tyotya is what I am now calling Aunt Ella. It's the word that Dimitri uses, and he doesn't use Ella, he just says Aunt, and I find out somehow weird to say, so I've switched to Tyotya. That's just my own hang-up, I guess. So our little poet is back. This painful feeling, sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. I can't imagine any of the teenagers I know putting it so poignantly. But that's our Dimitri. He has always had this tendency to depression, and, he's hoping it will pass. God knows when, though. God knows when. And Ella has definitely noticed it and suggested to him that it's because of the guards around Ilyinskoye and the attached estate Usuvo, which they used when they were out in the countryside in the winter. So you recall, I hope, a few diaries entries ago when they were about to depart for Ilyinskoye, that Dimitri expressed fear, which he regarded as irrational, but nonetheless was hard to shake. The fear that the peasants would rise up and kill them all, in his words. And so maybe Ella was aware of that. Maybe Maria felt that way too. And so when she saw that Dimitri was depressed, she suggested that might have been the case, but he denies it, and I have no reason to counter what he says about that. I think it's just, well, on the one hand, he has this tendency. On the other hand, he was so happy and had such a sense of well-being, being in Tsarskaya Selo, adjacent to the Alexander Palace and spending time with Nicholas and, also Uncle Kostya and Pavlovsk. He and Maria had been quite separate from the family for, since 1902 until they made this trip to Tsarskaya, because they'd been in Moscow and no other members of the family were in Moscow. And so this sort of opened up a whole new world to them. And it was great. It was just what they needed. And now here they are, back in this sort of isolated state again. I don't know who Mikhail Petrovich was. We met Mashkovsky yesterday, and I wasn't sure he was, so now we have who he was. We have some clarity on that, although I'm not sure why they would have brought in an officer from the Kiev regiment, or if any of the guards on duty were from that regiment. Okay, this is rather ironic, isn't it? They're having coffee in the morning at 7:30. So previously, it seems like they were having coffee at 8:30 or even 9:30. And that was obviously Ella's routine. But now, she's got all these activities going on, so maybe she has a tighter schedule than in Peterhof, which was something of a holiday for her. So she's getting up earlier, and she wants the children to join her in the morning. This is their breakfast. But the irony is that in a previous diary entry, Dmitri complained that she was always late to coffee, or just in general. And now he's the one who's late, and she apparently loses her temper with him over that slight infraction, because he says that she gets very angry. And that seems to me to be consistent with the way Sergei ran his household, judging from the, just little comment that Dmitri said about feeling ashamed when he was living with Uncle Sergei, and what Maria indicates in her memoirs, that when you broke a rule, Sergei really came down upon you. And so, Ella has, I think, decided that she is going to honor her husband's legacy and try to raise the children in the same way. And we've seen how when Ella first arrived in Tsarskaya Selo, Dmitri's behavior really changed, and he started going to bed early, and he started minding his P's and Q's. So she, like her husband, runs a tight ship. But if indeed she was habitually late, it was certainly rather hypocritical for her to get so angry at Dmitri for being late. Okay, now there's this reference to riding. So the same verb is used for riding horses and riding in a carriage, just like in the U.S., we went for a ride, could mean in a car, in a carriage, in what have you, or it could mean that we actually rode on horseback. And so in Russian, a lot of times like in English, they use another word, verchem, which is a word for up. So even if you go upstairs, naverch. But for some reason, that's what is used in Russian with horses. And so when that's used, it's clear. And when that's not used, well, ride is pretty ambiguous. So I'm calling all horse people out there, if any of you who are watching this, I know Ed knows a lot about horses, to maybe clear up for me what he's talking about. He says, Maria, we went riding Maria on Normandies, and he uses the plural as though if it was horse riding, she rode on more than one horse. I don't know. And then he rode on a Swede. So are there horse breeds that are called, a Normandy horse or a Swedish horse, that are distinct breeds? Please do let me in on that. Please do leave a comment if if you have that information. So the Sweet House was clearly where the Sweet had lived back in the day when Sergei and Ella were entertaining Grand Duke Paul and his wife at Ilyinskoye in the summer. Each of the Grand Dukes would have a suite, and the ladies would have ladies in waiting and that sort of thing. So there was a house on the grounds of Ilyinskoye. It's not a sweet house, SWEET, like a sweet little cottage. It's the building that housed the suite, but now it's being used, at least in part, by Ella's favorite soldier, her favorite wounded soldier, Zakharchenko, and this other man who's called Burba. Not a Russian name, but who knows? Zakharchenko is also is Ukrainian. So they are wounded soldiers, but they're not soldiers who are requiring medical treatment. Apparently, they are probably soldiers who lost a leg or something like that, amputees, and they need to be able to make a living. They can't be soldiers anymore. So they're learning various handicrafts. And in this case, they're learning to weave. And I think when Dmitri talks about sitting around, going to the Sweet House and sitting around, I think he means that Ella was there, because I really find it difficult to imagine that he and Maria did that on their own, given Dmitri's attitude about such things. So I think Ella was still with them. She hasn't left for town yet, meaning Moscow. And so they are at the Sweet House while Zakharchenko and Burba are weaving. And Dmitri doesn't use his usual word that it's a bore, but he says, yeah, we were sitting around for a long time. Afterwards, brother and sister go bike riding, and they do apparently stop somewhere to watch how wool is being dyed somewhere on the estate, whether that was more of the the soldiers who were being rehabilitated or whether it was peasants. And at 10:30, Tyotia leaves for Moscow, and the children have lunch, apparently by themselves. And then Dmitri spends the next 4 hours playing soldiers with Borya until Aunt comes home. So this was always a problem for Dmitri, when there wasn't a lot of structure, when he was sort of left to his own devices. He drifted a bit. And so here it would be the equivalent, I suppose, of a kid nowadays when mom goes off somewhere, the kid spends 4 hours playing video games. So he's playing soldiers with Borya. Okay, probably down on the ground, I guess, either outside or inside, instead of some tabletop war game. With actual rules and that sort of thing. The kids probably had their own rules, as kids typically do. I played with army men. You had those little plastic army men that you could get in bags of like 100, or even order off the back of a comic book. But I don't think I did beyond about 10 years old. But of course, for my generation of teenage boys, we dove right into the latest thing then, which was not video games. So we had them, but they were primitive. But Dungeons and Dragons. So that's what I would have spent 4 hours playing. Okay, so that's what he's doing until Ella gets back and they have their tea. And then he goes for another horse ride, this time with Laming. And he remarks that he feels sorry for Laming because Laming just doesn't seem to be comfortable on horseback, it having been so long since he was on a horse. And one of the most valuable things to me about the diary entries is being able to read them not only in succession, one after another, but to get the overall impression, which is sometimes more important than the details, at least to me, especially since I'm writing a novel. And this is so typical of Dmitri when he's depressed. You don't need for him to tell you in writing in his diary that he's depressed. There's just a complete mood change. And when he wasn't depressed, he was quite a lively person. But then you have a diary entry like this one where, he's not full of life and mischief anymore. He's not commenting on things, like he's not saying, oh, it was so boring, oi, 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 when they were at the sweet house. He's not commenting. He's just sort of saying, yeah, we went riding, then we rode our bikes, then we stopped to see such and such, then we had tea, then we rode our bikes, then I played with Borya. And he's not giving us any of his usual lively commentary or even using adjectives. He's just putting it down. He's just noting it down. And then finally, another tip-off is when he says that he feels sorry for GM, because if he was indeed in one of his happy, lively moods, he would have probably told us how funny it was watching GM get up on his horse, or whatever would strike him as hilarious. So yeah, that is the status quo as we go forward tomorrow into the next diary entry. And it certainly is quite a busy day. In the time he's spending in Ilyinskoye, he's doing all kinds of outdoor activities around fishing and horseback riding and riding his bike, primarily with Maria. She doesn't have any friends there either, so they're with each other. And so it's eventful, but it's not giving him what he needs in terms of someone like Nicholas and the officers at Tsarskaya Selo to keep him interested and make him feel good. All right, so come back tomorrow, and I'll see you next time. Bye.